Hey everybody, Dustin DePirac here, columnist Ryan Karchi. The rookie eventually made it after a brutal, nasty trip down I-69
Brutal
today.
7.5 hour drive home. So it was a good day overall.
Yeah. But he got here, and he got here in time to see easily the most competitive back and forth game Indiana's had. But they still pulled it out. They was really looking kind of dangerous there for a while. They were really back and forth with Butler in the first half, and Butler was playing pretty well, but IU pulls it out 75-59. They end up winning this one comfortably. I think it covered the spread. I don't know if we're supposed to talk about things like that.
14, I think it was.
I believe it was, but so
not that we know.
Yeah, not that gambling. Yeah, not really. We would not gamble in this game. We would get fired for that. No question about it. But anyway, point being, this I think you learn a lot about Indiana today, without question. I did not think it was going to be this close. I did not think Butler was going to be able to hang, but they showed they're still, even without the same amount of talent that they've had, even without Matt Howard, even without Shelvin Mack, Gordon Hayward, players like that with those kind of stars, they're still gritty. They still play really tough defense. They still get after you, and that was tough for Indiana early on.
They have the same mentality, and kind of what I thought was most impressive about Indiana is that they came out and matched that mentality. I mean, they were just as scrappy as Butler has been the past 2 years, and they won a game like Butler has done so many times. I mean, they were diving for loose balls. They were getting hit in the face. I mean, Tom Pritchard himself I thought he was one of the most aggressive players on the floor.
Absolutely,
and that's
absolutely.
Just there was one moment. He dove for a loose ball and had like 4 Butler players on top of him, just
and he was ripping at it
in a pile, and he came out with the ball. I mean, it was a jump ball, and Butler got it back, but still, I thought that play kind of embodied the effort today.
Absolutely,
it was intense, it was scrappy, it was physical, it was a street fight. That's what Cody Zeller said, but
it was the most. I mean, again, you did find out what kind of heart a lot of these guys have, and Pritchard was a guy that really stood out. I mean, he's obviously a guy who's I don't want to go so far as to say he's been marginalized this year, but just with Zeller playing as well as he has, the fact that he's been able to play the 5 in the games that they played so far, and with Derek Elston playing as much and as well as he has in the healthiest he's ever been. Pritchard just hasn't had a lot of minutes, but he's, he again is a guy that's very, very valuable defensively, and you saw that he was really being active, really denying, denying guys the ball, had a bunch of steals. The Ginger's on his way over. I'm sure he's going to make a cameo in a second here. But anyway, outstanding defensive effort. They held Butler to 38.2% shooting, 40% in the second half, and it was pretty good. You making an appearance or not?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Anyway, he's coming. Okay, so now we'll try to recover from that. Another thing they did defensively, Krishan Hopkins had 13 points in the first half. He only had 1 field goal in the entire second half. 6-11, 7 for 12. They really got after them. So that was a lot of what you saw. It was kind of, easily the most physical game that they've played so far. And they survived it.
And
Austin,
there was
you want to chime in here?
Yeah, you can chime in.
I guess what struck me, I was writing a post-game column about Tom Pritchard and how his sort of new role is good for the team because it means that they're not really counting on him offensively anymore. And it's good for him because it's an example of a senior really kind of buying into doing what needs to be done and playing to his strengths. And it kind of struck me, it seems in some ways like they kind of out-Butlered Butler.
That's kind of what I said.
They really, at least for about 25 minutes tonight, played the way Butler wanted to play. They ground, possessions were long. They were ground out. There wasn't a lot of transition offense, at least again not in the first 25 minutes or so. And certainly they started to pull away as they were able to kind of wrest control of the game and play the way they wanted to play. But, and I know Butler's not what it used to be, but I think it's important because the Big Ten is going to present you with a lot of teams who want to play a very Butler-like style of basketball. I think it's important for Indiana to know that it can play that way as well. It doesn't have to be wide open. It can still it can survive a cold shooting night. Because the truth is, I think Tom Green talked about this. I wasn't actually there. I was in Brad Stevens' press conference, but the truth was Indiana was getting the shots it wanted in the first half. It just wasn't making them.
Yeah.
So I think it's good for this team to see that it can suffer through some bad shooting. I think it's good for this team to see that suffering through bad shooting is a lot easier if it forces its way to the foul line, which it did. And I think it's good for this team to know that the game doesn't have to be played at an almost NBA-like pace. for them to win.
I think Tom Crean had the line of the night. I thought he said, he said he told the team after the game, I feel like you guys got better during this game, but I know you got tougher. And I think that was something that really stood out. I mean, I think they had to find out early that they weren't just going to be able to move the ball around and score the way they had in the first 5 games. That this really was going to be tough, and that they were going to have to adjust and they were going to have to adapt. I mean, it took them a little while to do that, but once they did, things changed. And like you said, you talked about guys getting to the foul line. I mean, obviously, player of the night tonight, Will Sheehy, 21 points, and he hit some huge threes. I mean, you saw a development of his range. He's not a guy that shot a lot of threes. He had 3 tonight. He had 7 all of last year. But what I thought the best thing he did was, especially during a stretch where Indiana had a real tough time getting buckets, he found ways of drawing fouls, and really crafty ways, I thought. I mean, he was just kind of like little hesitation moves in transition that forced guys, Butler guys who were just really flying around and playing defense. He noticed that some of those guys were a little bit out of control, and he could draw fouls. He could just be in a position where, even if he really, there was one possession, I think, where he was in no position to shoot whatsoever, but he knew he could get a foul. He knew he could get to the line somehow, some way, because he had guys flying at him, and he knew they were out of control. He knew if he just went up, he would get to the line. He had no chance of making the shot, but he could get to the line.
He was 8 of 10 when he got to the line. So
yeah, and he was you always talk about a 6 man as a spark, but he was a steadying force tonight, especially in a position. I mean, they went 10 minutes without a field goal, 10-21 without a field goal, and she had a bunch of free throws in that stretch, and was just able to just find a way, move the ball really well in that stretch. And some other guys did the same thing. They started kind of climbing on board as well, just finding ways to get fouled, just getting to the bucket, just finding some way to to get to the line and to take advantage of just how physical Butler was, and kind of use that against them.
And it was a pretty emphatic, that's kind of the word that I thought of, emphatic change in that second half. I know it just kind of seemed like they had a little bit more of a swagger. They had more grit, I guess, as Tom likes to say. And I thought the play that really put it away and kind of put the seal on the whole thing was when Cody Zeller came up under the basket and had a one-handed slam that kind of brought the house down, and it was it kind of seemed like a message. It was just sort of, we're gonna fight, and we're gonna prevail in games like this, especially against a team that's probably not as talented as we are. And I thought that kind of seemed like the end of the game for me, and it sort of put a seal on what was a pretty awesome second half for Indiana.
There were 4 guys I thought that seemed to really relish it once they kind of noticed what kind of game it was going to be. I thought Jordy Halls especially, because Jordy was again playing against for one, Eric Fromm, who was a guy that he was a high school teammate with, Garrett Butcher, who I imagine at some point along the line in high school he had to play against him at least once, I would think. And he just seemed to kind of relish that type of game. And he knocked down a 3 in front of Butcher that was just cold-blooded, basically. And he was, what's that?
It was very Prince-like.
As Osterman put it, pancakes, grapes, stuff like that. But Zeller, it took him a while as well, because he had a real hard time getting established at the post. I mean, there's a bunch of people on the live chat that were talking about how hard that they weren't looking to him. I thought they really were, and I thought Andrew Smith was really defending him well.
I think he needs to get better at getting open. I
this was.
I think he's still not good enough at making himself available.
Well, this was a growing up moment, I thought, for him, because Andrew Smith is the best post player he's played so far in college.
And he looked like a freshman at times. I mean,
especially without
the ball.
But he grew up. I mean, like a lot of them, I thought he grew up throughout the game, and without the ball, it took him a while to kind of figure out how much more physical he had to be to create space for himself, how much more of kind of a established kind of sustained push he was going to have to do just to find openings, and how much he was going to have to continue to move to get position. And I thought as the game wore on, he did, and he obviously got a lot of big rebounds. I think he rebounded a free throw that Watford missed, and just found ways of getting buckets. Still finished with 16 and 8.
He had 11 and 5 in the second half too.
Yeah. So those guys kind of grow up. But I thought even Oladipo had a rough first half. That Sean Hopkins carved him up a little bit. But I think he came back and had a pretty good second half. And Will Sheehy obviously was, pretty dominant. Was obviously the guy tonight. But
Hopkins only had 6.
He had
I think.
He had 6 points in the second half. He had 1 field goal as a layup with 18:45. That was it. After that, he did not take not so much didn't even take another shot after that point.
It was an important adjustment for Oladipo and for Sheehy, who I think saw some time on him too. I mean,
I thought Sheehy saw more time on him.
Player quicker than that this year, and that's where Oladipo was hurting Hopkins, and that's why you saw Danny Moore rotate onto Krishan Hopkins some in the first half, was because he was just too quick for Oladipo, but he adjusted well. They both did. Oladipo and Sheehy.
More another coming to the end here, but obviously big first test for Indiana. They survive it. They move on. Now North Carolina State is next. They still got Kentucky, Notre Dame coming up. It's a big win. It's a big stop.
Big few weeks ahead.
So, anyway, thanks, guys.
Thanks.